The massive grizzly bear rose up on her hind legs, towering 8 feet above the forest floor. Her amber eyes blazed with a fury that could stop a charging bull in its tracks. Around her, 6 gray wolves circled like shadows made flesh, their yellow eyes gleaming with predatory hunger. Between the mother bear's massive paws cowered her tiny cub, barely 3 months old, weighing no more than 20 pounds. The little one whimpered, pressing closer to his mother's protective warmth. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not here, not now. But sometimes nature writes stories that defy all expectations. And what happened next would change everything these forest rangers thought they knew about the wild. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications to catch more heartwarming stories like this one. Our story begins 6 months earlier, in the pristine wilderness of Glacier National Park, Montana. Meet Sarah. Yes, that's what the park rangers called her, a 4-year-old grizzly bear who had just become a mother for the first time. Sarah wasn't your typical bear. At 400 pounds, she was smaller than most adult females in the region, but what she lacked in size, she made up for in determination. Park Ranger Mike Johnson had been tracking her movements for 3 years, and he'd never seen a bear with such personality. She was different from the start, Mike would later tell reporters. Most bears avoid human areas completely, but Sarah seemed curious about us. Not aggressive, just aware. Like she was studying us as much as we were studying her. When Sarah's cub was born that spring, the rangers were thrilled. Population numbers for grizzlies in the area had been declining, and every new birth was precious. They named the little male cub Charlie, a perfect companion name for his mother Sarah. Charlie was everything you'd want in a bear cub, playful, curious, and absolutely fearless, sometimes to his mother's exasperation. While other cubs stayed close to their mothers, Charlie would wander off to investigate every interesting smell, every rustling leaf, every butterfly that caught his attention. Sarah was patient with her adventurous son, but she was also protective. She taught him which berries were safe to eat, how to catch fish in the crystal-clear mountain streams, and most importantly, how to recognize danger. The summer passed peacefully. Sarah proved to be an excellent mother, and Charlie grew strong and healthy. The rangers documented their daily routines, morning fishing lessons at the river, afternoon naps in the shade of towering pine trees, evening foraging sessions where Charlie learned to identify the best huckleberry patches. But as autumn approached, something began to change in the forest. The salmon runs were smaller than usual. Berry crops had failed due to an unusually dry summer. Food was becoming scarce, and hungry animals were venturing into territories they normally avoided. Wildlife biologist Dr. Jennifer Walsh noticed the signs first. She explained, "We started getting reports of unusual animal behavior. Predators were ranging farther than normal, competing for resources. When food becomes scarce, even the most established territorial boundaries start to blur." For Sarah and Charlie, this meant their safe haven was about to become a battleground. It was late September when the wolves arrived. The Moonlight Pack, 6 strong wolves led by an alpha named Ghost by the rangers due to his almost white coat, had traveled down from Canada following the caribou migration. But the caribou had taken an unusual route that year, leaving the pack stranded in unfamiliar territory with winter approaching fast. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and the pack began hunting in areas they'd never explored before. That's when they caught Sarah and Charlie's scent near Beaver Creek. The first encounter happened on a Tuesday morning. Sarah was teaching Charlie how to overturn logs to find grubs and insects, an important skill as they prepared for hibernation. The mother and cub were so focused on their lesson that they didn't notice the shadows watching from the tree line. Ghost had positioned his pack strategically. These weren't inexperienced wolves. They'd been hunting together for 4 years, and they knew how to coordinate their attacks. The plan was simple. Separate the mother from the cub, then overwhelm the smaller target. But they underestimated Sarah's maternal instincts. The moment she caught their scent, Sarah's demeanor changed completely. Her playful interaction with Charlie stopped instantly. She sniffed the air, her muscles tensing like coiled springs. Then she saw them. 6 pairs of yellow eyes watching from the undergrowth. Sarah's response was immediate and decisive. She swept Charlie behind her with one massive paw and rose up on her hind legs, making herself appear as large and intimidating as possible. Her roar echoed through the forest like thunder, a sound that could be heard for miles. The message was clear. Stay away from my cub. The wolves retreated that day, but Ghost had learned something valuable. This bear was alone with her cub, far from other grizzlies who might help her. She was vulnerable, and they were hungry. Over the next 2 weeks, the stalking began in earnest. The wolves would follow Sarah and Charlie at a distance, learning their routines, mapping their territory, looking for the perfect opportunity to strike. Sarah knew she was being hunted. Bears have an incredible sense of smell. They can detect scents from miles away, and she could always smell the wolves' presence. It was driving her to exhaustion. She couldn't relax, couldn't let her guard down, even for a moment. Charlie, sensing his mother's tension, became more clingy and fearful. The playful, curious cub transformed into a nervous shadow who rarely left his mother's side. Their peaceful existence had become a constant state of vigilance and fear. Ranger Mike Johnson noticed the change during his regular wildlife surveys. He noted in his reports, Sarah's behavior became erratic. She was avoiding her usual feeding areas, staying closer to thick cover. We could see the stress affecting both bears. The breaking point came on October 15th. Sarah and Charlie were at their favorite fishing spot, a shallow bend in the river where salmon still gathered in small numbers. It had always been a safe place, surrounded by open meadow where danger could be seen approaching from any direction. That's exactly what Ghost was counting on. While Sarah focused on catching fish for Charlie, the wolves moved into position. They'd learned from their previous encounters, and this time they came from downwind. By the time Sarah detected their presence, they had already cut off most of her escape routes. Ghost stepped into the open first, his pale coat almost ghost-like in the afternoon sun. One by one, his packmates emerged from concealment. Sarah's heart must have pounded as she realized they were completely surrounded. Charlie pressed against her mother's leg, whimpering softly. At 3 months old, he weighed barely 20 pounds. A single wolf could overpower him. Sarah looked around desperately, calculating distances, escape routes, possibilities. There were none. This was it. The confrontation she had been dreading was finally here. What happened next defied every expectation, every wildlife expert's prediction about how this encounter should have unfolded. Sarah didn't run. Instead, she pushed Charlie behind her and charged directly at Ghost. 400 pounds of furious mother bear hit the alpha wolf like a freight train. Ghost, caught completely off guard by the aggressive tactic, barely managed to dodge the initial attack. Sarah's claws raked across his shoulder, drawing first blood. The pack immediately converged on Sarah, but she was ready for them. Fighting with a ferocity that stunned the experienced predators, she spun and struck with precision that came from pure maternal instinct.
A wolf named Scar by the rangers tried to circle around to Charlie, but Sarah anticipated the move. She backhanded the wolf with such force that he rolled 15 feet before coming to a stop, dazed but alive. The fight was brutal and chaotic. Wolves darted in and out, trying to wear Sarah down, while she pivoted and struck, never allowing them to get behind her where Charlie cowered. But the odds were impossible. 6 wolves against 1 bear, even a bear fighting with the strength of a mother's love, was simply too much. Sarah was powerful, but she was also growing tired. Each swing of her massive paws required enormous energy, and the wolves were wearing her down systematically. Ghost, recovering from the initial shock, began coordinating his pack more effectively. They spread out in a wider circle, forcing Sarah to constantly turn to keep them all in view. It was exhausting, and they all knew it. That's when something extraordinary happened. From the forest came a sound that changed everything. The deep, resonating bellow of another grizzly bear. Then another. And another. 3 adult grizzly bears emerged from the tree line, moving with purpose and determination toward the confrontation. Leading them was Magnus, a massive 600-pound male that the rangers had been tracking for 7 years. Behind him came Luna, a mature female, and her nearly grown yearling son, Bruno. The wolves froze. The mathematical equation had just shifted dramatically, and not in their favor. But here's what made this moment truly unbelievable. These bears had no biological reason to help Sarah. Grizzlies are typically solitary animals. Adult males especially have no investment in protecting other bears' cubs. In fact, male grizzlies sometimes pose a threat to cubs themselves. Yet here they stood, 3 additional bears forming a protective barrier around Sarah and Charlie. Dr. Jennifer Walsh later theorized about what might have caused this unprecedented cooperation. We believe Sarah's distress calls carried much further than we initially realized. In the echo chamber of that valley, her roars for help could have been heard for miles. What we witnessed was possibly the first documented case of grizzly bears responding collectively to protect another bear's offspring. Ghost looked around at his pack, then at the 4 adult grizzlies now facing them. The alpha wolf was experienced enough to know when the odds had shifted beyond any reasonable chance of success. With a series of short barks, he signaled the retreat. One by one, the Moonlight Pack melted back into the forest, their hunting expedition a complete failure. But the story doesn't end with the wolves' retreat. What happened next was even more remarkable. As the immediate danger passed, Sarah should have been relieved to see the other bears leave. Instead, she did something that wildlife behaviorists are still discussing in academic journals today. She approached Magnus and performed what can only be described as a bow, lowering her head and touching her nose to the ground, in what appeared to be a gesture of gratitude. Magnus, the massive male who could have easily seen Charlie as a threat to his own genetic legacy, instead gently touched Sarah's head with his own. Then, incredibly, he bent down and sniffed Charlie, seemingly accepting him into some kind of extended family unit. Luna and Bruno followed suit, each greeting both Sarah and Charlie with gentle touches and soft vocalizations that sounded almost like purring. For the next 3 days, something unprecedented occurred in Glacier National Park. The 4 adult bears and Charlie moved together as a temporary family unit. They shared fishing spots, foraged together, and most importantly, maintained a protective perimeter around little Charlie. Ranger Mike Johnson captured much of this behavior on video. In 30 years of wildlife management, I've never seen anything like it, he marveled. These bears formed what I can only describe as a temporary adoption network. They were collectively raising that cub. During those 3 days, Charlie learned from multiple teachers. Magnus showed him how to catch larger fish. Luna taught him which plants were medicinal and which were just food. Bruno, still young enough to remember being a cub himself, played with Charlie in ways that helped the little bear recover from the trauma of the wolf attack. Most importantly, Sarah got 3 days of relative rest and recovery. The constant vigilance that had been wearing her down was shared among the group, allowing her to regain her strength and emotional equilibrium. Dr. Walsh documented extensive notes about this behavior. Would we observe challenges, fundamental assumptions about grizzly bears' social structures? These animals displayed empathy, cooperation, and altruism on a level we've rarely seen in any wild species. On the 4th day, as naturally as they had come together, the bears began to separate. Magnus was the first to leave, touching noses with both Sarah and Charlie before heading toward his winter territory. Luna and Bruno followed a day later, but not before Luna spent an hour grooming both mother and cub, a behavior typically reserved for family members. The Moonlight Pack eventually found their way to more suitable territory further north, where they successfully hunted elk and prepared for winter. Ghost's shoulder healed completely, and the pack learned to avoid areas where protective bear mothers might call for backup. Sarah and Charlie spent the remaining weeks before hibernation peacefully preparing for their long sleep. But the most remarkable change was in Charlie himself. The traumatic encounter with the wolves, followed by the protective response of the bear community, seemed to have given him a deeper understanding of both danger and safety. He became more aware of his surroundings while also more trusting of his mother's protection. When they emerged from hibernation the following spring, Charlie had grown into a healthy, confident yearling. Sarah appeared more relaxed and confident as well, as if the support she'd received had reminded her that even in the wild, mothers don't always have to face challenges alone. The rangers continued monitoring both bears, and over the following years they documented several instances of Sarah and Charlie interacting positively with other bear families, behavior that was extremely rare before the wolf incident. Today, 5 years later, Charlie is a fully grown adult bear with cubs of his own. And here's the most beautiful part of this story. He's been observed displaying the same protective behavior toward other bear families that was shown to him during that critical moment in his youth. Sarah, now 9 years old, continues to thrive in Glacier National Park. She's had 2 more litters since Charlie, and each time she's proven to be the same fiercely protective, innovative mother who called for help when her family needed it most. This incredible story reminds us that even in nature's most challenging moments, compassion and cooperation can emerge in the most unexpected ways. Sometimes it takes a community to raise a cub, even when that community consists of normally solitary bears. What started as a life-threatening encounter became a testament to the power of maternal love, community support, and the remarkable intelligence of these amazing